So we're just
Echo
gonna
shot.
lay down
It's like 50 feet farther down the hallway than stakeout.
from where the microphone is.
Yeah, there'll be another microphone set up, I'm sure. Is that better? Here for you. Great.
Maybe another seat? Maybe another seat for Victor? Надо еще одного места для него. So maybe you should, Victor, maybe you should sit right here, and then when you come up, we'll switch.
Okay.
Okay. A little higher. Here, here.
Shall we start? Time is moving. Well, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, thank you for coming for this meeting. Thank you for your support during all this time. I will feel this support. We are going to speak about the referendum, so-called referendum in Crimea, to be held in 2 days. Mostly focusing on the real feeling and intentions of the people in Crimea. You have had a lot of the confirmations, proofs, evidences that it is a legitimate Russia-instigated so-called referendum has been appointed in brutal violation of the Constitution of Ukraine by the local parliament of Crimea, which together with self-proclaimed Crimean government is totally controlled by Russian marionette separatist leaders. By the way, with criminal background, who illegally seize the power with the help of Russian armed forces. It is worth mentioning that the date of referendum has been already changed twice. It was first planned for May 25, then moved to March 30, and last time to March 16, allowing almost no time for preparation. This clearly demonstrated their serious apprehensions of an absolute lack of legitimacy of their actions in the long term. Russia needs this so-called referendum, which will happen under the Russian guns, only as a picture to show to the world it does not really care about its results. All the decisions, including illegal adoption of Declaration of Independence of Crimea and decision to join Crimea to Russian Federation, have been already taken, without waiting for the results even of this falsified referendum. This is why a large part of the population, understanding its false intentions, has already announced it has no wish to take part in this staged referendum and will ignore it, even though people are really scared of Russian soldiers on their streets. Please help me with the first picture. This rally was filmed by one of the Western companies yesterday in Crimea. Look at the real intentions of the population on the streets in Crimea.
The new authorities of Crimea, with support of occupational armed forces, have created here a criminal state. This so-called Crimean self-defense is where all these criminals are concentrated. When this self-defense has been created, we started witnessing kidnapping of journalists, physical attacks of journalists, preventing them from reporting truth, as well as kidnapping of activists of Euromaidan. I want these so-called liberators to go away from Crimea, from our land. I want to live as I lived before, live happy and free, so that my granddaughter could study where she wants, not where somebody tells her to. I want peace in my family, happiness, and that there was no war. I don't want to live in Russia. Ukrainian anthem is being performed by activists.
If you noticed, all these manifestors, protesters, they are speaking Russian language, all of them. So that's why I would like to start to state once again, noticing that there are absolutely no reasons and no grounds to protect the Russian-speaking minority in Crimea, the main pretext of Russian invasion there. This is the obligation of Ukrainian government to support and protect any minority and their rights, inter alia, Russians as well as all others. No ethnic minorities asked any help from Russia. Even Russian-speaking population of Crimea is trying to reach Russian leadership saying, "Stop protecting us, we do not need your help, take your troops away." As the evidence, I want to mention that unexpectedly for Russia, the OSCE High Commissioner of National Minorities, Ms. Astrid Thors, during her visit to Ukraine, has found no evidences of violations of threats to the rights of Russian-speaking population in Crimea. On the contrary, the most unprotected ethnic groups in Crimea are Crimean Tatars and Ukrainians. Madam Thors stated, I quote, "I am alarmed about the risk of violent conflict on the Crimean Peninsula and the effects this could have on all communities, particularly the Ukrainian and Crimean Tatars groups. Rash decisions on the future status of Crimea are a major source of tension and expose divisions between the peninsula communities. There is a real risk of bloodshed," end of quote. I have invited to this press conference some important people who could present you evidence what really is going on in the peninsula and around the interests of the national minorities there. I have with me Tamara Galo-Alexy, leader of the Ukrainian community of America. I have Alla Bakali on my left. She's a leader of the Crimean Tatars World Association. And I have on my right the Rabbi Yaakov Dov Blaich, Chief Rabbi of Ukraine. a lot of the different speculations are coming from Moscow about anti-Semitism, and I invite him to brief you and to answer your questions on on these accusations. Now, I would like to give a floor to Madam Tamara Alexei to address you.
Thank you. On February 28th, the Russian Federation invaded a sovereign country by sending troops into Ukraine. This step by Vladimir Putin and the unanimous ratification by the Russian Duma is a blatant violation of international law, including Russia's obligations under the UN Charter, the 1994 Budapest Referendum, the Helsinki Final Act, not to mention numerous bilateral agreements between the two countries. The Russian invasion of Crimea was explained under false pretenses that ethnic Russians are under threat. Putin continues to say that Moscow reserves the right to protect its interests and those of Russian speakers in Ukraine, underlying that there are real threats to the life and health of Russian citizens and compatriots on Ukrainian territory. Such claims are utterly false. The incursion of Crimea, as some are calling it, is nothing short of a Russian invasion. By sending forces into Crimea, the Russian Federation has not only violated Ukraine's sovereignty, but blatantly breached bilateral obligations and international laws, undermining the very foundations of international law, as well as regional and international peace and security. Modern Ukraine has no history of ethnic conflict. The current threat to ethnic Russians and Russian speakers has been fabricated by the Russian Federation as an excuse to invade a sovereign country. To illustrate these points, I'd like to highlight a few points, but I'm sure my colleagues, the indigenous Crimean Tatars and my Jewish colleagues will present a more personal view. I'd like to touch upon some general points that I think need to be highlighted. First, the fact is that the borders are effectively sealed in Crimea. The Crimean authorities have closed airspace to all commercial flights except for Moscow. The waterways are blocked by sunken ships. Trains are not running. And the pro-Russian militias continue to block all observers from OSCE, UN, and such. The Crimea's information space has also been blocked. All Ukrainian information channels, as well as the local Tatar networks, have been closed and replaced by Russian channels that are continuously airing anti-Ukrainian propaganda. Additionally, journalists have been beaten and captured, kidnapped. As of yesterday, we were heard that 4 prominent Ukrainian activists were seized and have not been seen since. A good friend of mine who is a journalist from England has been in Crimea for several months, and he wrote, and I'd like to quote what he wrote, that yesterday I had the chance to interview the Minister of Information in this Third World Republic, Dmitry Polyansky, and when I asked about the missing activists from the Ukrainian community in Crimea, his response was like a chilling 1984 Ministry of Information speech. He said there was no Ukrainian community in Crimea, and therefore those people whose names he, in any case, had not heard of, had not disappeared. The Crimean Tatars are also being harassed. Bogus election commission teams are going from house to house, verifying the accounts of ethnic Tatars, and are either taking their passports or tearing them up. Russian propagandists claimed the rampant fascism and Nazism, anti-Semitism in Ukraine, and two days ago, a chief rabbi in Kyiv stated that we should draw a distinction between nationalism and Nazism. Nationalism is loving one's own people, and Nazism is hating others. There is no anti-Semitism in Ukraine. And lastly, the referendum is specifically designed to endorse secession, and only secession. The estimated 1.2 million voters will have only 2 choices to vote on. No is not an option. They can either vote yes to support Crimea joining the Russian Federation, or yes to restore the autonomous 1992 Crimean Constitution, which the Crimean Parliament has already noted will result in union with Russia. The latest information that I received yesterday evening goes beyond the borders of Crimea. 2 people were killed yesterday in Donetsk in eastern Ukraine during a fight between pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian protesters. The pro-Russian protesters were bussed in from Russia. Now the Russian Interior Ministry has declared that Kyiv is not able to control the situation in the country and that Russia is prepared to, quote, take people under its protection. This is a direct threat of intervention into eastern Ukraine. Moreover, Russia has amassed at least 10,000 soldiers. Ukraine estimates much higher. They estimate up to 80,000, plus tanks, artillery units, attack helicopters, and fighter jets along its border with eastern Ukraine. Moscow has also sent a handful of fighter jets to Belarus, a Russian ally on Ukraine's north, essentially putting Ukraine's forces on three sides of Ukraine. And Russia characterizes this troop buildup as intensive training exercises. The situation in Crimea, and now not only in Crimea, is critical. So the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America condemns Russia's invasion of sovereign Ukrainian territory and its continued use of aggression, intimidation, and provocations. The crisis in Ukraine will not simply go away. In an increased, interconnected, and economically interdependent world, the UN must take the lead in promoting international norms and consolidating geopolitical stability. The security and territorial integrity of Ukraine must be addressed, and the invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation must be reversed. All options need to remain open. Russia's imperialist ambitions and its invasion in Ukraine must be brought to an end. Russia must forsake its imperialist ambitions and behave as a civilized member of the international community, because the security of the free world lies in the expansion of democracy, not in the appeasement of a failed empire intent on renewal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tamara Galo-Alexei. Now, I invite you to listen an address of the leader of Crimean Tatars. And then I will give you the floor. Mr. Chubarov.
Объявление хоть какого референдума, а также в отсутствии законодательства, это является действием дальнейшей дестабилизации ситуации в Крыму. Соответственно, и учитывая другие факторы, в том числе и то, что предлагается провести референдум в форме, которая совершенно игнорирует мнение коренного народа полуострова крымских татар, Меджлис крымско-татарского народа не признает данный референдум, соответственно, призывает всех жителей Крыма, независимо от их национальности, полностью бойкотировать все этапы его подготовки, а также голосование в день проведения референдума.
It was leader of Crimean Tatars, Mr. Chubarov. And I will give the floor to Ms. Alabakali, who is the leader of Crimean Tatars World Association.
It works? Okay, thank you. As introduced, I'm Ayla Bakala, and I'm here to convey to you here in this room that the Crimean Tatars are the indigenous people of Ukraine. And we, as a people, were deported en masse on May 18th, 1944, by Soviet communism from their homeland. Now, today, with the invasion of Crimea by Russian soldiers, we at home are in total fear of the memories of the Soviet occupation, which has very much come alive since the Russian invasion. And once again, the indigenous Ukrainians, the Crimean Tatars, have the most to lose. Today, right now, there is a Crimean Tatar man who is 91 years old. He has lived through Stalin era, World War II, the Sürgün, which is we noted as the deportation, and saw the collapse of Soviet Union, and since its fall has returned to his homeland. Never did he think to see the invasion of Crimea. No one has more to fear in this potential conflict than the Crimean Tatars of Crimea, Ukraine. If you visit Crimea and you see the Crimean Tatars, you can see the scars of deportation in the places they live, in their facial expression, and in the overall persona of the Crimean Tatars. Here in the United States, there is a small Crimean Tatar community. We receive phone calls from our family and friends, and thank goodness to the social media network and to the wonderful journalists in this world. We are ever so thankful that they provide us a venue to communicate to you that the Russian soldiers mark and identify the homes of Crimean Tatars with X marks on their doors, signifying that this house is a resident of the indigenous Crimean Tatars. The Crimean Tatars say, we cannot go to sleep not knowing what we are going to wake up. Are we going to be woken up again as we did in 1944 at 4 a.m. to be loaded on cattle train wagons and deported elsewhere into Siberia and to the Central Asian states? We have no repose, the Crimean Tatars say. And the younger generation of Crimean Tatars stand in shock, feeling why there is a need for them to protest for peace. They never imagined that they would relive what their grandparents and their parents fear. There is, needless to say, that the Crimean Tatar community here in the US and in Crimea are unified with the Ukrainians. We utterly reject the cessation of Crimea. We are indigenous people of Ukraine. We respect the territorial integrity of Ukraine, and we would absolutely, as noted by the film, the Crimean Tatars will not participate at this referendum. And there is also one more incident that I would just like to elaborate that Tamara had mentioned, and that is that the Russian soldiers, once they identify, because there are only 300,000 Crimean Tatars in Crimea since their return, they number approximately 12 to 13% of Crimea. Once they identify the Crimean Tatar homes, they have begun to confiscate Crimean Tatar passports ahead of the March 16 referendum. And the reason for this is that the indigenous Crimean Tatars were key players in keeping Crimea as part of Ukraine in the 1991 referendum on independence that set to break away from the former Soviet Union. But the majority of Russian ethnics that reside in Crimea absolutely do not reflect the actual position of the Crimean Tatars. And it is the indigenous people that provided the crucial margin for Ukraine's independence. So here we go again. On March 16th, Sunday, we are facing the same referendum, but under different context and under different circumstances. And we have just learned via Twitter that the airspace in Crimea at the time of the referendum will be closed for security reasons. And I dare not say how fearful are the Crimean Tatars. We are not visitors in Crimea. We are not visitors there. We are the indigenous people of Ukraine. There is a number of us, 300,000. That's quite a high number. And I emphasize Crimean, because Crimean Tatars are not just Tatars. As the Soviet authorities insisted, there was no such thing as Crimean Tatars. So in this UN, we participate annually at the United Nations Indigenous Peoples Forum, and the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People are revisited annually, and it testifies to the commitment of the international community to indigenous people and the overwhelming human rights principles that are enacted in the articles within that declaration. So I would like to just emphasize one more time that the Crimean Tatars will not participate at this referendum. And as of early this morning, we are told that the Crimean Tatars will come out of their homes and stand on the sort of the streetways, if you will, on the roadways, stating their position that they are not for the cessation of Crimea and that they stand fully with the Ukraine integrity, and that Crimea will always be part of Ukraine.
Thank you, Ms. Bakali. Thank you. And now another part, but very important part, because in all this mess of propaganda, what our Prime Minister yesterday demanded from the Security Council members, from this organization, and later during the meeting with the Secretary General, truth. We need truth. The world needs truth. That's why I'm so honored to have today with us the Chief Rabbi of Ukraine, Yaakov Don Bleich.
I'm going to speak from here. I'm a rabbi. I'm used to standing while I give sermons. I've been living in Ukraine for 24 years and lived through 2 years of Soviet rule and lived through the breakup of the Soviet Union, and I've been serving my community there for these 24 years as Chief Rabbi of Ukraine. A little bit of background: Ukraine, over the last 22 years since it gained its independence, has had a Jewish community that has blossomed. When I got there under Soviet rule, there were 12 synagogues in all of Ukraine. Today, there are close to 100. Consider that there were 1.5 million Jews living in Ukraine in 1990, and today there are only 360,000. So you can imagine that even though the population has gone down, we know about the great immigration of Jews to Israel, to the United States, to Germany, and other countries. The Jewish community has strengthened tremendously and has really had the growth that we feel is only possible under a true democratic society, when people feel free to express their views. I'm not only talking about religion, but political views and everything else. The Jewish community really felt great in Ukraine over the last 22 years. That began to change during the revolution, when we did have, and I want to make this very, very clear, because I'm always asked this question. I'm not an apologist for Ukrainian anti-Semitism, and I'm not an apologist for Ukrainian nationalism, but I do love Ukraine. And I will not, just sit back and let anybody spread lies about Ukraine and about the Jewish community of Ukraine, or to cynically use anti-Semitism as an excuse for invading Ukraine's territorial integrity, which is what's happening today. It's an unbelievable information and propaganda campaign that's being waged against Ukraine. And we, the Jewish community, are being used, or I should say abused, with this propaganda. The Russians are coming to protect us. And it's hard for us to tell Russia, we don't want your protection. I mean, somebody made a great joke recently. He says, I don't speak Russian in Ukraine, not because I'm afraid I'll be discriminated against, but I'm afraid someone will come to protect me. So basically, that's this is really what's going on. I mean, we're living our life. Now, there were attacks on the Jewish community over the last 3 months. I'm not saying they didn't exist. They did happen. There were 5 identifiable anti-Semitic attacks. 4 of them happened in the not so far past, but one happened yesterday. And I want to just point them out, because I think it's important to note the difference, not in what happened, but also in the reaction to them. In January, 2 people from my synagogue, actually in Kiev, were attacked. One was stabbed on Friday night, and obviously the police were called, but the person that had to take the report was home, and why bring him out Friday night from his house? So Monday, the report was taken. I'm talking about a stabbing, right? And they didn't even go to the place where he was stabbed, and we had a lot of issues with these anti-Semitic attacks. This was just January, during the revolution. Another fellow was beaten up. He was followed from the synagogue and beaten up in his stairwell. Both of these attacks that happened again in my synagogue, which caused our community tremendous grief, and we were really, really nervous about it. We had to, after that, strengthen security. We had to really take a lot of things to do. But the important thing was that, again, living in Ukraine, having seen what anti-Semitic attacks look like, these were not normal Ukrainian anti-Semitic attacks. And everybody's saying, maybe this was done by someone. There's a message here. These were premeditated by some organization that really had their act together. They were watching the synagogue. They had 6 people there. 3 people followed the guy home. 3 people were watching. This is not Ukrainian anti-Semitism. Who did it? I don't know. It doesn't make much of a difference to me, actually, or to the guys that were beaten up who did it. They got hurt. And when we have to be protected and protect our community, and our community has to feel protected, it's not important where the attacks are coming from for that part. But for the political part, when we speak about Ukrainian antisemity, it's very important to know who is doing this. Are these being staged? Zaporizhia, which is in more eastern Ukraine, the synagogue, there was an attempted firebombing of the synagogue. Who did it? Zaporizhia didn't have anti-Semites there. There aren't Ukrainian nationalists that are there that are attacking Jews. Simferopol, the synagogue, had graffiti, killed death to the Jews. For 22 years, Simferopol was under full and total Ukrainian control. There were no anti-Semitic attacks, no graffiti. The day that the Russian army invaded Crimea, that actual night, someone made this graffiti on the synagogue. So this is leading us to really question who is behind all this, and is this really an excuse for Russia to come invade Ukraine's territorial integrity? Again, I'm not going to speak about Putin. I'm not going to speak about the politics. I'm a rabbi. I'm a Jewish leader. I'm going to speak about my community. I'm going to speak about the way we felt for 22 years in Ukraine. We felt safe. We had issues. There were anti-Semitic attacks. When we had something to say, we were able to say it. We were able to come and lobby for more protection. We were able to speak to the press. We were able to say what our problems were. Nobody ever stopped us from saying anything, and the police worked with us. Last night, there was an attack on a rabbi in Kiev, and he was hit from behind, knocked to the floor, and stabbed twice in the leg, taken to the hospital, and everything. This is the first time in many years. Within a half hour, the police were there, security services were there, the state security services. An investigation was opened immediately. They will be working with the community to investigate. And I keep on saying this, and I'll say it again. Many societies have anti-Semitism. Even in the United States, is anti-Semitism. We don't judge a society by the anti-Semitism. We judge a society by the reaction. And the reaction we got last night made us feel good. It made us feel good that at least there's someone to talk to. There was a reaction, immediate reaction. We also heard last night condemnation from the Prime Minister immediately about this, and a guarantee and a promise that that this will not be tolerated, and that's what we needed. And by the way, even though Yanukovych was not known as an anti-Semite, some of his best friends were Jewish, right? But we couldn't get this reaction under his government when these things happen. So we don't feel as safe as we did 6 months ago before it all started. We feel a lot safer than we did 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago. And we're hoping that the government, which is stabilizing, and it's going to get Humpty Dumpty back together again. It's going to put the house back in order. We are confident and optimistic that this government, even though it's an interim government, will tackle the issues of security. And I say the 3 most important things in Ukraine today are security, security, and security. Those are the 3 most important things. The 4th most important thing is the economy, and that's going to help a lot. But I think that they're going to get Humpty Dumpty back together again. We're going to get this society back together again, as long as we're able to survive without outside interference into the internal affairs of Ukraine. That's the most important thing. Let the Ukrainian people decide what they want to do. You believe me, Ukrainians living east, west, north, south are all united. Everybody wants to have one Ukraine. And if there's one thing that the Russians accomplished, they brought the Ukrainian people a lot closer together than they were before. They've done a lot to unite the people living in Ukraine and for people to speak out. And I think that one of the most beautiful things that I've seen over the last few weeks is these television commercials that are going in Ukraine where people from east, west, north, and south are just getting up there and saying why they love Ukraine. And I love Ukraine because the people of Ukraine, they don't take anything from anybody. And they showed it during the Maidan when they were all there together, different nationalities, everybody. They said, we will not take it sitting down. And this was in the words of one of the former government leaders. He said, this is a catastrophe for Ukraine. 3 revolutions in 20 years, And then when I spoke after him, this was at a round table when we were trying to bring the sides together, and I said, one of the reasons I love Ukraine is because we have 3 revolutions in 20 years. We just aren't indifferent. So thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for listening, and I hope that you guys will get that message out there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Rabbi Blai. You noticed yesterday the message the Prime Minister sent to the world community and to Russians. Ukrainians are confident that the ordinary Russians, they do not want war, they do not want conflict. Ethnic Russians in Ukraine, they also protested the invasion. They stated clearly that they are comfortable in Ukraine. I have a special guest here, Russian journalist Alexandra Sviridova, who is, her publication is very fair. I know that for many journalists who are working in Russian media, it's not easy under the different pressure, but they have a soul and they have a right to bring to the world the truth based on their own feelings. May I ask you to address us?
Thank you so much for coming. I was not ready to speak English. That's why I'm sorry I will be not correct all the time. I'm independent writer many years, all my life, and I lived 20 years in Ukraine, 20 years in Russia, and right now I'm 20 years in the United States. And problem is that we have 2 positions. One side think that it's good to be part of Russia. Other side think that Ukraine has military invasion. And whoever represent anything against Russian invasion, we have no space in Russian press where we can talk about this. Yesterday in Moscow, it was closed, a lot of opposition mass media. And even in New York, I have no place where I can print my articles. Whatever I would like to say, I have to print it in Ukraine, in independent press there, and after that put it on Facebook where we have to exchange our opinions. I'm in touch with my former colleagues in Ukraine and Russia. All of them lives in information blockade, and only you can help the world to hear our voice. We just want tanks to be out of Ukraine. Whatever, Russian tanks or maybe some other tanks, it's very dangerous. And I am originally in this special city, Kherson, which was unknown, but thanks for invasion, everybody knew now this word because tanks sink there, and even landmines right now there mark the border, which will be proclaimed maybe Monday. Please help us to be out of this information blockade. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Sviridova. Thank you. So time is flying, and I would like to leave space for your questions. Please recognize some other guests. I have my countryman from Kharkiv, Viktor Rud. Kharkiv, this is eastern part of Ukraine, where also there are territorial claims from the Russian side. So, and he could be helpful if you ask any questions about the eastern part of Ukraine. And I have Mr. Futey here, who is an expert in the constitutional law. If it is his expertise is needed, please do mine. Well, so floor is open. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. My name is Kahraman Halis Selik. I am with Turkish National Television, TRT. On behalf of the UN Correspondents Association, thank you all for briefing us here. Now I have one question that all of you can probably answer from the perspective of the minorities especially. What is Ukraine going to do to ensure that the Ukrainians in Crimea, the Tatars in Crimea, Jews in Crimea, and other minorities are protected? How are you going to ensure that they are going to protect it? And how much of a support are you getting from the international community? Is anyone assuring you on that? Thank you very much.
I'll answer first as far as the Jewish community is concerned, and I think that this goes for everything. You have to understand, until now, for 22 years, Ukraine has taken care of all its national minorities. Everybody was able to live freely and do what they wanted and how they wanted. And like I said, the Jewish community blossomed. And I won't speak for the Crimean Tatars because they have a very good spokesperson for them here. But they actually came back to Ukraine after Ukraine got its independence. Many of them have come back because they wanted to live in their homeland, etc. The question is not what Ukraine is going to do now. The question is what Russia is going to do. The question is, what will Ukraine be able to do if Russia, keeps that border closed, doesn't allow the Ukrainians to do what they're supposed to do in their country, and the Ukrainians cannot be in control of a situation where the Russians are in control, obviously. So if the Russians pull back, the way everybody's hoping and praying that they will, what the Ukrainians will do, they'll do what they've been doing for the last 22 years, protecting the rights of all the national minorities, allowing them to live their lives the way they see fit, live in a democratic society where civil society is strong, where politicians can run in any political party and they can even win seats, believe it or not. That's what Ukraine has been doing the last 22 years, and that's what they'll continue to do. What's going to happen if Russia illegally annexes or does something else to Crimea? I think those questions have to be asked to the Russians.
Well, so first of all, Ukraine from the very, very first days of her independence adopted a law of 1992 on national minorities. All the rights, languages, cultural traditions provisioned in that law. And this law just the base to protect all the rights and to expand the government's protection of their interests. What is important that all these years until recently, we had no time, no measures to address some specific groups like Crimean Tatars. Only 3 days ago, the new government brought to the parliament 2 laws on the Crimean Tatars. What they are demanding since our independence, on their status and the status as the people who returned, and the law on their rights and freedoms, how to protect them more. So we have a legislation. And now, as far as Crimea is concerned, I agree with Rabbi Bleich that Ukrainian central government does not control fully what's going on there. What we know since our independence, it was not easy to protect other ethnic group there because whatever we try to do, for example, to help Ukrainians to have more Ukrainian schools, because the balance at the beginning of independence was very dramatic. Ukrainians they had only one school, Ukrainian school. More than 700 schools, they were Russian schools. And when central government started to open new schools, so immediately from Moscow was a signal that it is Ukrainization, total Ukrainization. The government for all these years did not a lot to protect the Crimean Tatars and to settle them. But nevertheless, the programs have been launched. The villages and the houses were constructed. Even a university for Crimean Tatars were built. But we need to do more. But it is possible only if we bring this stability, and we are going the road of the building the civil society and the democratic one. We do count that accession to the European Union, which is planning to be held this spring, would be helpful to to protect the rights of minorities more. Your question concerns also the language because it's circulating. Well, again, coming back, 1992 is the basic document protecting the rights of all the national minorities groups. Speculations about the recently cancelled law on language policy is absolutely different. To explain once again, what happened in 2012 when the former government brought this law to the parliament. This law was criticized by the Council of Europe. The High Commissioner Wallenberg protested because, first of all, this law was expected to be a ratification of European Charter on minority languages, but not languages of the ethnic minorities. Minority languages means Crimean Tatars language, Karaim's language, Gagauz language, and about 10 languages who do not have their statehood outside Ukraine, and their languages could disappear because of the very closed space these languages are circulating, and not, if are not protected, they can disappear. It was exactly the purpose of the European Charter, but the government at that time decided, well, not to focus on these particular languages, but generally. It was not needed because the law of 1992 gave all this protection. Gave. Unfortunately, it was not explained why this law was cancelled. It was not explained that this law, while adopted, neglected the position of the opposition parties in the parliament and more than 2,000 amendments. The acting president suspended the decision of the parliament. He has not signed, and he stated that the ratification of the charter will be back in the parliament, and the debate will be taken. But again, to finalize with all the languages issues, a law of 1992 is the basic one. Please.
Joseph Klein of Canada Free Press. This question is for the rabbi and also for the rabbi and the representative of the Tatar population. Rabbi, do you have concern, I know you don't want to get involved in political issues per se, but do you have concern that there are members of the current government that are from the far right of the political spectrum, including the Svoboda Party and parties even to the further right, ultra-nationalists? Do you see that as a disturbing potential trend? And also, just in terms of the relationships between the Jewish community and the Tatar community in Crimea, could you comment on the degree of harmony between the two communities? Thank you very much.
Yeah, first of all, I'll speak about the issue of the right-wing parties, including Svoboda. I want to just remind everybody that Svoboda's natural percentage in the vote is approximately between 4 and 5%. They got 10% because they were inflated by people that wanted to build up the right-wing party. We know that. So they ended up with 10% in the parliament. They ended up a member of the opposition coalition, so to speak. And I spoke with the leaders of the opposition, including the current Prime Minister, Arseniy Yatsenyuk, and Vitaly Klitschko, who's the head of the Udar party before they came into government, before they came to power. And I discussed this issue, and I told them I understand that you're in the midst of a revolution and war and stuff like that. I said, but they have to take responsibility that if they do come to power, or when they come to power, and as they did now, eventually do come to power, they have to take responsibility to make sure that this is a European type of government, which means, I mean, it's so European that it even has the right-wingers inside. But but it has to be European type, which means there has to be democracy. Society, Ukraine wants to change society. They want to They want to, we want to feel comfortable, like I said. They took it upon their own responsibility, both Mr. Yatsenyuk and Mr. Klitschko at that time, and yesterday it was reiterated again by the Prime Minister, now that he's Prime Minister, that they are taking full control and full responsibility for anything that happens within the government. So even the right-wingers, under normal circumstances, because Ukraine is a democratic society, we, the Jewish community, as part of that society, may be up there yelling, hey, get those guys out of the government. But you know what outside threats do? They bring people together. So at this point, we're not saying anything. We're relying on the current Prime Minister and the parties of power to control whatever tendencies they may have. We have not seen any anti-Semitic tendencies from them, from these right-wing members of the government or parliament over the last months, which is something that's important. With the war, different things that took place that we protested about during the Maidan, during the revolution, but we were able to bring those protests and our thoughts to the leadership of the opposition, leadership of the Maidan. So again, under normal circumstances, we may have been out there yelling. At this point, we're saying, guys, go get it. In other words, stay together. Let's bring this, society together. Let's build a democratic society. We're going to respect each other, national minorities, and everybody else. That's as far as that's concerned. As far as the relationship of the Jews and the Crimean Tatars, I mean, we have a very, very good relationship with the leadership of the Crimean Tatars, with the former head of the Majlis, Mr. Jamalev, who's also a member of parliament. I mean, he has been a very, very, very good friend with the Jewish community. Actually, we've done twinnings on a number of times for the Jewish congregation and the Muslim community in Crimea. We've done them a number of times. I don't know if you're the Foundation for Ethnic Understanding with Mark Schneier, who does these twinnings of Muslim Jewish congregations. So we've done many, many twinnings. We work together in the Council of Church Religious Organizations with the Mufti of the Crimean Tatars. We have a good relationship with them, and we hope that that's going to continue.
I underline Rabbi's statement. With respect to the relationship of the Crimean Tatars, the indigenous Crimean Tatars have always had the Jewish community, and they're called the Karaim, and they are indigenous people as well. So the Crimean Tatars make no distinction in terms of faith. What their distinction is, if you will, is that they be Crimean Tatars. That is their, shall we say, their unifying purpose. So the Karaims have always lived side by side with the Crimean Tatars. This distinction is quite artificial. We never seen it expressed in the light that it's being expressed. The Soviet Union has imposed its ideology on our lifestyles for nearly 70 years and several generations. And given the hardship and the extremist rule by the communism, the evolution of the transition from a communist state to a democratic state, there are a lot of different groups that are expressed. And our indigenous leader has always said and maintained that democracy is the West weapon, the best weapon against communism and colonization. So these extremist groups that you say have come up are, in a way, a response to the extremist colonization that Ukraine has fallen under. And we believe that the situation that is occurring in Crimea and that also occurred in Kiev Maidan, which is a full desire for a democratic society in Ukraine. And I believe that this is what Putin and this is what communism fears, is representative government, expression of opinion, expression of thought, and no one wants to slide into pre-Soviet dictatorship. So in actuality, Putin is fearful of democracy. I don't think they know how to react to people's opinion and people's demonstration on the ground. So I would not venture to say that they've made any distinctions between Crimean Tatars and Karayims. They are always Crimean Tatars, and they too are indigenous people of Crimea, Ukraine.
Asma Nassar from Egypt. I want to ask you, Mr. Ambassador, how much do you think that the message that you always send to confirm that you will, the new government in Ukraine will respect all the people from all the religions, and this will change in this situation, or there is other reasons which we don't know? Maybe you can talk about. Thank you.
The message was sent by the new government very clear to the world and to all the people, ethnic groups in Ukraine, that we are building democratic European society based on the principles of equality, of rights of all. So under the strong control of the NGOs and civil society itself. So this is the best answer to the previous question. If the government is capable to control anything, any extremists or some ultra stance of anybody. Yesterday, the Prime Minister addressed the Jewish, Ukrainian, and Crimean Tatars community, explaining that we came here to build a democratic society. It means that democratic society can control and can guarantee. So we believe that we can do, because it was not the political leaders who brought the people to Maidan, who brought them to revolution. It was the people who brought politicians. And people now are providing a strong control, and we do believe that we have a strong social community in all the cities, on the villages, and they are standing at the governmental buildings. They are controlling all the ministries. So this is the basic principle of our beliefness that we are in a good way. Thank you. Yeah.
Joelle Metcalf, Asahi Shimbun. I wanted to ask a question regarding regional support for the Crimean Tatar minorities. As you said earlier, the Crimean Tatars are the indigenous people of Ukraine, but I've heard that Turkey might have an interest in their well-being. So the Turkish foreign minister was in the U.S. earlier this week. So I'm wondering if your organization or if the mission has tried to appeal to him for Turkey to engage Russia regarding the Crimean Tatars. Have there been any signals from Turkey for concern or support in this situation?
Well, the Crimean Tatars have always had support from Turkey and from the Turkic community. We are a group of people that we share history and historical alliances, and it is the Turkish community that has always reached out in times of conflict, in times of hardship for the Crimean Tatars. They know our history. It is not, it's a tragic history. It is not a easy process to heal when an entire peoples have been deported en masse. We have not begun to heal. We were just beginning to heal at the Orange Revolution. And the Maidan Square also was in part, a very small part of expression of our healing process. So the Turkic community supports us as common brothers and sisters, if you will, and because of our history, because of our cultural ties, and also similarity in language. These are important components. They were always there, and they continue to state that they will always be there for us.
Just to add a couple of things. We have several programs to help the Crimean Tatars to settle themselves and to adopt themselves. Some of the programs, they are working from the European Union side. And some of them going from United Nations UNDP. I have just a list of these programs. During the 15 years, the UNDP provided the assistance to 700 villages and small towns in 14 regions in the peninsula. Majority of these projects, they are focused on Crimean Tatars. So that's why not only Turkey is caring about, but the,
George Baumgarten, correspondent for Jewish newspapers in North America. I'd like to address myself to Rabbi Bleich, and my apologies for not being in on the phone call you did with the New York Board of Rabbis earlier in the week.
I noticed you were there. You weren't there.
Pardon?
I noticed that you weren't there. Yeah.
Thank you.